And a good evening. We bid you a welcome to tonight's program. You're welcomed here by the League of Women Voters, also the Columbia Public Library. And this is a hybrid candidate and ballot issues forum. My name is David Lyle. I'm pleased to be the moderator tonight. I appreciate the League of Women Voters and the library giving me the opportunity to do this. The League has provided some handouts for audience members, including ballot issues information, several handouts with information from the county clerk on photo IDs and no excuse absentee voting. And there is a voter's guide available at the League's website. And again, that website is lwvcbc.org, stands for League of Women Voters, Columbia Boone County.org. Tonight, we're focusing on the general election that comes up on November 8th, and we're going to look at contested races for the Missouri state representatives in Boone County. We have three that are contested, districts 44, 47, and 50. And we're going to be having pro and con speakers on amendment number 3, which is the legalization of recreational marijuana. And then we're going to conclude tonight's forum with an informational PowerPoint presentation on the other ballot issues. Amendment 1, which is municipal securities. Amendment 4, which is Kansas City police spending. Amendment 5, Missouri National Guard, and the Constitutional Convention question. So the League of Women Voter Candidate Forums, both candidates in a two-person race need to be present in order to go through what some of you who have been at these forums before would know as the standard form for the forums. We're disappointed that 2 of the state representative races will only have 1 candidate present. Sheree Tosin-Reich let the League know that she would not participate tonight for the 44th race. And James Musgraves, a candidate in the 50th district, has not responded to the League's invitations to participate. And so if he shows up, we will have him as part of our program. But if not, what we will be doing is something special with the candidates that are here. We'll do kind of a give and take interview. It will not be like what we see coming up now, which is going to be for the 47th representative seat. We have the 2 candidates for that. After that portion of the forum, we will end the formal candidate forum and then go to conversations with the 2 candidates that are here for the 44th and the 50th. Then we'll proceed with the ballot issue presentations. So we want to welcome our candidates for the 47th district. The candidates there are Adrian Plank on the Democratic side and John Martin on the Republican side. They're here and they're going to take part in the conversation about the election. They are vying to represent, and there will be a new representative for the 47th. It covers along Highway 63 and south of I-70 to around Huntsdale. The League has put up this map and you can see where the different districts are. And you'll see that there are 2 other districts there that we are not talking about tonight. And that is because the candidates are running unopposed for those 2 districts. So you will not hear anything about District 45 or 46 tonight. If you're wondering about 49, you'll see that that is in Callaway County and not any part of Boone County. So we'll not be covering 49 either. Each candidate is going to have time for a 2-minute introduction, opening statement. Then we'll do a League of Women Voter questions, and then we'll have questions from the audience. If you would like to submit a question, please do so by writing your question on the index card. Hold it or wave it in some way, and a League member will come and get that from you and bring it up here and then hand it to me. If you are following us tonight on Zoom, you can enter your question in the chat section of the Zoom screen. So by chatting, you can also submit questions tonight. We'll have those questions, and each candidate will have 1 minute to answer each question. And after we reach about 20-25 minutes of our discussion with these 2 candidates, we'll have a closing statement, so 1-minute closing statement. Candidates give their opening statement in the ballot order, and then we'll reverse that for the closing statements. John Martin, appreciate you being here tonight. We'd like to hear your opening remarks, please.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, League of Women Voters, and for everybody in attendance tonight to come and be a part of this event. My name is John Martin. I'm a local business owner. My company is Pro Pumping and Hydrojetting. I'm also a former pastor. I'm a husband and a father of 4 children, 3 of which have graduated from Hickman High School. 2 are graduates at University of Missouri, 1 in civil engineering and 1 in education. Got a 3rd child there now in education. My youngest son is a 6th grader. And so that's my family. I grew up in Boone County, grew up in Centralia in a farm family, and raised on a farm, so I'm not a stranger to hard work. Went to college and went on to seminary. I came to Columbia in 2004 to start a church. And then I also started working at Sam's Club. And then after Sam's Club, then I got involved with Pro Pumping and Hydrojetting, began to work there. And then became the manager of that company, and then bought it in 2017. So we're thankful for that. I'm a member of the Columbia Chamber of Commerce, the Boone County Farm Bureau. I'm an investor in regional economic development here in Columbia, seeking to bring growth and jobs to our local economy. Like I said, my kids in there with their education. I've been an active volunteer coach for Daniel Boone Little League. Also a volunteer in the Columbia Public Schools, the Russell Boulevard Elementary Outdoor Garden, being a part of that. And I'm also a member of Midway Heights Baptist Church. My main campaign slogans and principles would be the importance of strong schools, challenging our schools and holding them accountable to do a great job teaching basics, getting kids prepared then for the workforce, prepared for the University of Missouri, trade schools, as well as some of our other colleges and the community colleges here locally. Safe communities, very important to back the blue. We do not want to be defunding police. We want to fund police. And then also thriving economy. As a small business owner, want to see our state be open for business, encourage businesses to come here where we have a lower tax state where businesses want to come to our state and not drive them away with excessive regulation. And so the Democratic Party has a huge monkey on its back right now, and that's called President Biden and his poor leadership in our economy, telling people to stop, stop drilling for oil, and our gas prices, inflation are out of sight because of poor leadership from the Democratic Party.
That's John Martin. Thank you. And now Adrian Plank, your opening remarks, please.
I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters. You all have been doing important work for a long time. Thanks for having me. Your work is more important than ever when it comes to our democratic process. And I've been here and growing with you for the last few elections, and I appreciate the time you've given me. I'm a union carpenter by trade. I'm married 28 years. My daughter is 17, going to Hickman High School in a couple AP classes, very smart. And I'm proud of her. My wife, I couldn't run for office if it wasn't for my wife. She's fantastic. She's smart. I'm running to protect working folks and small businesses from the disparities of bad government policy that panders to the extreme wealthy. I will protect Missouri farmers from the sellout to foreign entities, monopolize corporate farming systems. I will push for small government when it pertains to keeping Republicans out of our bedrooms and protecting human rights to privacy and protecting the marginalized from legislation meant to further cancel and harm people for who they are. I've been in Boone County since '96. I'm from Huntsville, Missouri originally. My dad is a retiree from the Thomasville Power Plant. I have the privilege as a union carpenter to work on very many different projects when it comes to power plants and hospitals and that sort of thing. So I have a unique perspective on where our government should be investing. So my name is Adrian Plank. I'm here to represent the constituents of the 47th district.
We're going to start with questions now. We'll start with John Martin. You get the first one. And these are questions from the League of Women Voters that they've selected and provided for tonight. If elected, what will be your top priority on behalf of the voters in your district?
Top priority would be continued job growth in the area. As a small business owner, I know it's vital to have strong job growth, and also coupled with that would be the support of the University of Missouri and our trade schools, where we're having a good, solid trained workforce of people coming out that are trained and qualified and skilled, and then having a business environment in our district where businesses want to come and grow and hire people and develop those type of business growth in our neighborhood, in our district.
All right, Adrian Plank, same question for you. If elected, what would be your top priority on behalf of voters in your district?
My top priority will be to cinch down super PACs. The reason for that, for instance, they just had a special session for tax breaks for the wealthy. And what I mean by the wealthy, I mean organizations like Show Me Institute, Americans for Prosperity, a Rex Singfield group, a Koch brothers group. They had a special session to give tax breaks to the wealthy. They used our tax dollars to give tax break to the wealthy. What's that do for us? Oh, it inspires business. Well, they also cut home health services for the elderly. They cut the RX prescription drug program for the elderly. They kicked 100,000 kids off of Medicaid and bragged about the money they saved. They'll cut the university because of those tax breaks. They always do. They'll cut education funding when it comes to K through 12, and they're already starving. And so whenever they say they support public education, that's nonsense.
We're going to start with Adrian Plank on this one. It's semi-related, but not exactly the same question. What are the concerns of the voters in District 47, and how will you address them if elected? These may have come up while you've been campaigning.
You know, the issues with voters is obviously they're concerned about the university losing jobs because of these tax cuts. There's a lot of university retirees and employees in the 47th district, and they're really concerned about that. They're also worried about their rights as women and mothers. They're also worried about corporations with big wind turbines in Harrisburg, which I can understand their concerns. I'm for local control, and I think they ought to be able to have their say in what comes into their territories. I'm also, you know, Rocheport's concerned about flood waters and having a retaining wall, and Sturgeon is really concerned about teacher retention because they can't afford the pay because of the tax cuts from the Republicans in the House.
John Martin, what are the concerns that you're hearing from the voters in the 47th?
Two things, David. First of all, community safety. The Democratic Party for 2 years has been yelling defund the police, defund the police. And I see people that want to see safety in our community, to take care of criminals, be a law and order society. So it's very, very critical that we support the police. And I've had rallies myself with Back the Blue, Back the Flag. And so we need to support and fund our police, our highway patrol, our safety agencies. And number two is just the economy. For example, right now as a business owner, a year ago, it cost me $260 to fill up one of my big pump trucks. Now today, $500. And so out of control, fuel prices, that's a direct result of Joe Biden and his poor decisions on saying we're not going to drill for oil. Now we're dependent upon foreign countries for our oil and our energy. And so we see that issue. And so the economy, and then the inflation, then high food prices, the two big things that I'm seeing that people would like to see a change, and the Republicans have the principles to bring us a strong economy and not the high prices that come from Democratic policies.
Another question from the League of Women Voters. John Martin, you're first on this. What efforts will you make to establish a dialogue with the constituents that you would represent if elected?
A dialogue with the constituents. Obviously, as an office holder, would have as far as legislative assistance, and be able to communicate to me their needs and then challenges, and so would be someone that would be open. I've already met with, for example, like the schools. We have to support our schools. I've already met with all of our superintendents, the 3 schools that are in the 47th, the Sturgeon schools, Harrisburg, as well as Columbia. Already met with their superintendents to establish a dialogue there. Again, I work with READY, Regional Economic Development, and their needs and some of their priorities is for economic development and job growth. And so those Chamber of Commerce, all those are important events. Farm Bureau, I'm a member of Farm Bureau, to meet with those folks. Pork producers, 4-H, I'm a 4-H leader. All those are opportunities to rub shoulders with people and hear, the concerns and needs that they have.
All right, Adrian Plank, same question to you. What efforts would you make to establish a dialogue with your constituents?
Well, I've made quite a bit of effort in the last 6 years knocking doors. It's important to come down and knock doors and talk to the constituents and find out what their concerns are. Now, when elected, obviously, that interaction will need to continue, at least to some degree, but they will also have open access to the office and have their concerns brought to me, whether it's by phone or email. And I think, as far as these organizations that we try and support, especially when it comes to labor and home health services and the elderly, those people who really don't have a voice, they're going to be free to come to my office. And if they have a problem with that, I'll come to their house.
Let's go to questions that we've already received from the audience. Again, if you are here in this room and you'd like to submit a question, get them up to the front row, and one of the League of Women Voter members would do so. If you're watching on Zoom, make sure that you use the chat section of that screen to ask your question there. One of the questions from the audience, we'll start with Adrian Plank on this one. Do you support the recent tax cuts from the special session?
Oh, my goodness. I think I kind of covered that.
You did cover that.
I just think, we've had a situation in our political society where our government's purchased. And whenever you take our tax dollars to have a special session to give tax breaks to Rex Sinquefield and the Koch brothers, the people who buy our politicians and our elections and our judges, I think that's important, and that's why it's a big concern of mine that we need to cinch down super PACs. If we could cinch down these super PACs, those policies aren't purchased no more. And you've got to talk to your constituents. If you pander to the billionaires, who do you have to talk to? You don't have to talk to anybody. And so that's very dangerous in a democratic society.
All right, same question for you, John Martin. Do you support the recent tax cuts?
Yes, I sure do. Number one, again, with the high inflation, high gas prices, things like that, anything our state can do to help just the local working man and woman and family to have extra income. And so the cutting of those of income taxes is a great idea. The state has been open for business. Governor Parson did a great job during the COVID crisis of keeping our state open for business. And so the income from the state into the state coffers has been strong. Actually, there's a surplus there. So that could be something that can be returned to the people. We're the rightful owners of those funds. And so I think it's very, very important to have that, to have those funds available. And that's, as a relief to our citizens.
Yeah, I'm gonna get $11.
Let's
I'd like to add one other thing as well. We talk about the Democrats always attacking the wealthy. Those with capital create jobs.
Those with capital already have money.
Like Sean Hannity says, he never worked for a poor guy. And so it's people with wealth that then create jobs. In my company, when there were tax cuts at federal government, I was able to grow.
We'll let you respond to those in just a second as far as the tax cut is concerned. But one thing I am concerned about is getting through as many questions as we can from those in the audience. And if we get stuck on one, a lot of people are going to be disappointed. There's two that are kind of related here. John Martin, you're first on this one. If elected, would you propose a bill to reverse the Missouri trigger law, or the Dobbs Act is what this is related to? I think we know what the question is about. It's about your position on reproductive rights or abortion.
Sure. To answer your question directly, no, I would not introduce a bill to change that. I'm a pro-life candidate. I think it's very, very important to come alongside as a pastor with the empathy that come alongside ladies that are in crisis or pregnancies that are unexpected crisis or unexpected pregnancies. Come alongside them, encourage them, help them. There's great pro-life clinics out there that give help and aid and ministry to those ladies. Bring the child to term. It's a life. Life begins at conception. It's a human being. Every one of us at that stage, we were in our mother's womb alive, and that needs to be brought to life and then nurtured and cared for. And so I'm very much a pro-life candidate, with the exception of the health of the mother would be one exception.
I was going to follow up with that, and the same thing for Adrian Plank, but is that the exception you would make?
Yes, yeah, and the health of the mother would be an exception I would make, yes.
Okay, Adrian Plank, same question for you.
Every abortion is about the health of the mother. Everyone. So whenever you have a political party who uses their ideology to make legislation, I was brought up in a conservative Christian home. I understand where they're coming from, but I can tell you, people want to be Christians based on what they see out of somebody else trying to work to be a Christian. And those forced policies from the religious right is not a way to make policy. Live your life the way the Lord tells you to live your life, and do the best you can. That's how you want people to become Christians, is because of how you live your life. And so whenever you push Christian theocracy over, and let's say, Republicans always talk about Sharia law. I mean, they don't want it, right? I mean, Christian law is not going to be the same, but it sure is getting pushed in our state capitol.
Let me ask you what would be your position if you were going to support a law to address this question? What would you like to see in that law? Just briefly. I mean, John is clear on what he has said. What would you support in a law on reproductive rights or abortion?
Well, obviously the trigger law is a sweeping law that doesn't really, I mean, let's be honest. We've got a law that gives more rights to the rapist and a person with incest. And so when you have a political party who pushes things, they're always talking about they're against pedophilia. Well, let's be honest here. They've got a law now that encourages pedophilia and rapists to do whatever they want. The mother that got raped, the victim, has to go to that person and say, hey, can I have your permission to do what I need to with my health needs? That's nonsense. And so when you give permission and availability to those types of people, that makes them the party of pedophilia.
Let me ask John if you'd like to make a comment on this issue, since I gave Adrian Plank 2 minutes on it.
Well, we have laws that, for example, when someone rapes or commits sodomy, they are to be punished properly. And so, but then there's a life in the womb, and there's a mother to be taken care of. And so, again, I'm a pro-life candidate, and I think it's very, very important for our society. We're the party of life, an opportunity for little children to experience their first piano recital, their first day of kindergarten. And to come alongside ladies and children and bring life is very important to the Republican Party.
We'll start with you, John Martin, and this is another question from the audience. What would you do for the Black community?
For the Black community, two great, great question. Two great, opportunities there to continue job growth, opportunities for folks to have jobs. As a business owner, I'm in restaurants every day, pumping grease traps and septic systems, things like that. All kinds of help wanted jobs out there. So encouraging people to work. Our government right now, way too much of our government is about dependency. Democrats are constantly wanting to grow government, that government's the answer. No, government's not the answer. Self-responsibility, free enterprise, capitalism, that's the answer. So people getting jobs, and then education, always having the door open, all to be, all folks are, we want them to be educated, be trained, to get into the workforce, have families, be married, have families, and encourage, family life, and, be a part of that, and part of our community, very much so.
Adrian Plank, same question to you. It's pretty short. What would you do for the Black community?
I have policies set in place to help all people regardless of race. And I want a fair equity system for everyone. I understand the issues individuals face within the communities of color, and unequivocally stand for diversity and inclusion. I would be honored to have the privilege of representing the Black community, along with being able to reflect on their words. I want to be visible and accessible for Black communities by holding community events and meeting where I can be their heartbeat and listen to them and ask them questions. I'll work to make sure that the Black communities are provided with necessary resources and to be heard in Columbia and at all levels of government.
We'll move on to another question from the audience, and this is Adrian Plank. First on this one, would you support, and they're emphasizing the word local control of CAFOs, or the large confined lots that you'll find hogs or cattle perhaps on?
Well, let me, when we talk about protecting Missouri farmers, that comes with local control. And so when your health departments don't have the ability to regulate the excesses of CAFOs, and let me give you an example. Let's say the city of Fayette, let's say it's what, 1,500 people, give or take. And you put a CAFO, which is a hog facility that has 7 to 10,000 hogs, and one hog produces 5 times more waste than a human being. Well, those people in that city can't make up for those. So they put all this waste on our farmland, which, as fertilizer, right? Which we can understand. We need more and more fertilizer every year because we destroy our soil. And so whenever those biomasses get put on our ground, they get in our streams and our water. And so if they can't regulate that and say, hey, we're going to hold you accountable for the disasters you're creating. Republicans used to be about conservation, but now they just pander to foreign corporations who produce those chemicals. And so if we're going to protect Missouri farmer, we need to diversify our farming industry instead of monopolizing our system to foreign corporations.
John Martin, would you support local control of the large confined feedlots?
The Department of Natural Resources right now, the statewide organization that has the oversight of that, and also in conjunction with local control, is doing a good job. And I think that they have adequate laws, and they are working with local entities, county entities, things like that. And so I would just support a common working ethic between those two organizations to make sure that they are following the Department of Natural Resources rules, that then create a safe environment for, obviously, for production, for food production, as well as environmental safety as well. Those are important aspects of working together with common sense laws.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
The DNR has been staffed with pro-CAFO foreign corporation people on the board. So they've never turned down a permit, and it's not because of anything other than pandering to the foreign corporations. And you're talking about Smithfield, which is Chinese owned, and you're talking about JBS, which is Brazilian owned. They're selling their farmers down the river.
John, rebuttal to that, or you? I'm trying to be
Well,
fair. Both sides.
you've got, that's a challenging issue because you got foreign investment, but they're creating jobs. They're creating and they're producing the meat that we eat. When we go to Gerb's and Walmart, that's the pork chops that we're getting from those type of farms. And so we have to be careful. And we can say we're just going to shut them down and not have that, but that's a lot of our production right there. Yeah, we can say we'd like to have more family farms. I'm from a family farm, but when you have Democrat policies that are raising our interest rates and land prices are going up and all those things making it harder for people to acquire land, those are all things that are hurtful to our economy. And so we have those production facilities right now providing a lot of our food.
John Martin, first on this one. My family owns a small business, says this questioner. Can you give some specifics on how you would like to see Jeff City keep businesses alive in Missouri?
Alive in Missouri.
Mhm.
Okay. Just some specifics. Number one would just be keep our taxes as low as possible. Obviously, government, you have to have the basic, our essentials, our schools, education, you have transportation, our roads, infrastructure, things like that. Our prison system, obviously for safety, for community safety and our policing, highway patrol, things like that. But then to keep that budget as minimal and as streamlined as possible, where our government is doing a good job with the services they offer, keeping our taxes low, and then providing a business environment. I'll give you an example. For example, like the state of California, Gavin Newsom, he's telling everybody we got to have electric vehicles only by 2035. Now he's telling people don't plug them in after 4. Those are regulations that hurt economies. We don't want that. We want to have a common sense. Let the capitalism, let the free enterprise market take care of those kind of things. That attracts business to Missouri. Those type of rules, people are leaving California in hordes because of crazy policies like by Newsom.
Adrian Plank here, same answer to the question. This person's family owns a small business. What are some specifics on how you would like to see Jefferson City keep businesses alive?
Well, first of all, the free market works good when you don't monopolize our food industry. We've got 4 major companies that own 85% of our meat industry. And so whenever you do that, that's not a true free market. And so whenever they profess true free market, I don't know what they're talking about. They're not really supporting free market capitalism. And the way to do that is to diversify our farming industry and create more farmers and give them the ability to raise our food instead of giving it away to China and Brazil.
We are kind of on a schedule here, and I'm getting the cue from League of Women Voters that we're going to have to wrap this portion up. I hate that because we have some more questions that I would like to ask, but I'm going to ask one more and then we'll do the closing arguments. I copied off an article from the Tribune that was a reprint from a Springfield News Leader. They oftentimes run the reporter stories there. And the headline of this particular story was, as Missouri's state lawmakers campaign for election this fall, all politics is national. And they cite a science professor from Drury University who said, because so much is based on party and so much of the vote is driven by party identification, as we have become more polarized, one of the things that people still look for is messaging. And that messaging has been focusing on, if not national issues, at least a national brand. John Martin, you have spoken of the current president oftentimes, and so there is a question here that I will start with Adrian Plank. What is your thought about how some are saying that this is it's not at all, politics is not local now, politics is national, and it's a national brand?
Well, it's a shame. As a state legislature, it's important to represent the district. And so I'll give you an example. I was in line to run for office, and a Republican was standing next to me, and a reporter came up, I think it's Keller actually, and he asked him, why did you decide to run? And the first thing he said was Nancy Pelosi. And I said, of course, I don't keep my mouth shut. And I said, wrong. I said, you have a district to represent, and it's a shame that you bring national politics into it. Obviously, national policy has an effect on Missouri, but if we're really concerned about our constituents, we got to listen to them. And so he mentions California and all these other places and Joe Biden, but he didn't mention any bad policies of his own party. And that's where we have our divide. They won't take accountability for their own actions. And that's why I bring up the farming issues and women's rights and that sort of thing, because they just don't care about the constituent.
I'm going to revise the question a bit for you, John Martin, because the question was actually asked this way. Do you believe that the last presidential election was stolen, and would you support the previous president if he runs again?
The evidence that they did all the different probes and things like that, it shows that it was not stolen. And what I support the president, if he ran, the former president, if he ran again, I would not. I think there's other candidates that would be a better candidate for the Republican Party.
So answer then, you've still got time left before you hold up the stop sign. What about the idea that politics used to be local? Politics now has a national edge to it.
Well, it's common sense. The decisions that Biden does when he cuts off our oil supplies and things like that affects us at the pump. My very business is affected every single day, just like you guys. You go to the grocery store, it's affecting you every single day. So yes, that's very important. That's on people's minds, what's going on in our economy and who's leading our economy, the Democrats. And so look at the when I'm going around talking to people, they're saying our country is headed in the wrong direction. Well, who's leading that wagon? It's the Democrats, it's Biden. And his approval ratings are lower than the basement the guy lives in. And so we have these problems and we need to correct them. And the Republican Party has the principles. And so when I think of all politics are national, another thing that's important as well, locally though, Republicans, we support education, University of Missouri record funding. And we support the university. And those are examples of how we're supporting, Missouri constituents and Missouri needs right here.
Closing statements, I almost said arguments, closing statements. Adrian Plank, you get 60 seconds to wrap things up for you tonight.
60 seconds. I don't know, I just want to make a plea to the Missourians in the 47th district. Republicans have been in charge for 20 years. Job growth has been stagnant, GDP has been stagnant. They gave tax breaks to the rich before this special session, and all that's been stagnant. So they say that giving these tax breaks is going to stimulate the economy, but we pay for it. The working class pays for it, and it's time for a change. We need to develop our farmers. We need to protect human rights. And there's no accountability at the state capitol whatsoever. They have a super majority. They don't have to listen to anybody, and they don't. And so at the very least, we need somebody fighting for the working class and small businesses. It just isn't happening. Tax breaks for the wealthy doesn't put money in my pocket. It's a shame that trickle down economics is the Rex Singfield and Republican way. So we need to do better. My name's Adrian Plank, and I'm going to be your next representative of the 47th district.
John Martin, your final comment, please.
Yes, I would count it as a privilege and an honor to represent District 47 as the next state representative, representing the Republican Party and its principles that move America forward, move the 47 forward, our state forward, which is obviously part of the whole. Being a representative from the majority party that's in the state, we're a red state, to advocate for the University of Missouri, for example, has tremendous value. Democrats, for example, if they would someday take back control, may take our state budget in different directions. So we're part of the majority party supporting Mizzou very, very strongly. Record highs and as far as funding this year, public school funding, funding the transportation formula. So a lot of strength there. We have a growing economy, obviously have a surplus. And so those are important leadership principles that are happening in the Republican Party. My company, my logo for my company is you dump it, we pump it. And so as a dirty jobs guy, I know about the stink. Okay, I know about the stink. And I talk to people all the time. And again, they say that our country is headed in the wrong direction. Democrats are leading us off the cliff without common sense. And so when I know stink when I see it, and there's a lot of stink in our country right now, we need principles that can clean up the mess. And Republican principles help lead our country and clean up that mess.
These are the candidates for the 47th district. John Martin, Adrian Plank, we appreciate your participation, and I thank you. Good luck to both. We're going to take a 2-minute break. When we come back, we're going to have a conversation first with Dave Rathel, and it's going to be a little bit different than what we did here because we don't really have a forum. We're going to have a conversation, and then we'll do that with Doug Mann. So we'll back in 2 minutes after we take this break for our radio audience. We're back in the library for this. Now it's going to be a candidate discussion. We've heard our candidate forum for the night that had the contested race, and now we've got a contested race for this district, but we do not have both candidates. And this is a change from what the league has done in the past. In the past, if one candidate was unable or chose not to show up, then we didn't have a chance to talk with the candidate who was available. But I like the fact that they have now said we can do that, and we just have to do it in a way that, you know, pretend that we are sitting at home and you are in our living room and we're going to have a conversation. Before we go any further, I do want to say I think David Tyson Smith is back there. If you would wave, he is running unopposed for his district. Kathy Steinhoff right over here on this side, she's waving. Those are districts that are not having a contested race this year. So they are here. The league does not involve those who are running in uncontested races. Dave Rathel is here though, and I'm going to talk to him. He's running for what, District 44? Is that correct, sir?
The 44th district is the largest of the districts in Boone County. It's about 2/3 of Boone County outside the city limits of Columbia. Adrian Planks 47th is the northwest corner, or the northwest quarter, and some of the West County south of 70. But I've got everything up there that I think, is it green? Is it green? I'm colorful.
Yours goes from the North Boone County border all the way to the south.
Yeah, county line to county line, north to south, east of.
They have the same population.
Yes, they do.
Know that.
Yes, they do.
I'll give you some questions that the league has for our conversation, and then I want to kind of ask a couple other questions. I will say this before, if you were like a radio guest of mine, I would have said to you starting off, you know, the beer commercial or whatever the commercial is talking about the most interesting man alive. I think you're an interesting man. You're an interesting candidate because the way that you choose to run your campaign and just because of the background of what you've done. How would you respond to me posing that you're one of the most interesting candidates that we could have?
Thank you, and I hope it's interesting in a good way. I don't want to be thought of as a freak.
No, I don't think of you as a freak at all. I think that you are somebody who brings some interesting. I hope I have time to get to some of the comments that you have made on your website, because I find them to be very important ones. And I'd like to have you define those for those who would be voting for this particular district, the 44th race. But first, can you tell the voters why you are running for this position?
I would say that the campaign was conceived when I approached Tony Lupo, who is the chairperson of the Boone County Central Republican Central Committee, with a petition that I had started asking that the Boone County Republicans affirm that Joe Biden is the duly and legally elected president of the United States, and that the Boone County Republicans would eschew and disavow those persons and candidates who promote falsehoods that are promoted, you know, to challenge the legitimacy of the election. And Tony Lupo told me that the Boone County Republicans would not make such an affirmation. So I pondered, and when no one else would run, I decided that, well, someone had to. And the short explanation might be the one I gave to somebody in Ashland today knocking doors. Well, if my opponent were Liz Cheney, I wouldn't be running. There'd just be no point. It is a 60-40 district. So the primary problem is that Sherry buys into all the conspiracy theories or promotes them, or whether she believes them or does it out of cynical motivation, I don't know. But she travels with that crowd. So that is the necessary condition. What has been added to that is the Trump kept his word and packed the court with people who overturned Roe v. Wade. And now there are people in the county who might have otherwise, might have otherwise just let this one go, let Sherry go on this one, but now they're also provoked by that issue. So between her indulgence in conspiracy theories and her endorsement of the worst policies that Republicans have accomplished, has become the cause of the campaign.
You say on your website, I'm more Republican than the incumbent. So why didn't you run against her in a primary as a Republican?
Well, I don't know. That's an interesting question. It might have been even more futile than running as a Democrat. Yeah, but it's a reference to the fact, as I, at the very beginning, I was pointing out, okay, I'm 67. I kind of have seen some history. I was raised in large part by Southern Baptist Republicans. So now they were Republicans, not of the Donald Trump ilk. But those are the people that from whom I learned, well, we start with local decision makers. We don't centralize decision making in Jefferson City. This is why we have local school boards and why we have county boards of health and local school districts. What we've seen the Republicans do in Jefferson City is that when they can't have their way on something at the local level, they run to Jefferson City and make a new rule to hobble what people in their own respective communities prefer to do. So that's one way in which I am more Republican. I defend representative democracy. People who are buying into the conspiracy theories are not defending representative democracy. I fail to see how you can be a good Republican if you're not doing that.
It's interesting because you do comment and just pick up on some of the things you're inferring and talking about here. You're Republican small r, you're Democrat small d.
Yeah, it's more important to be loyal to those kinds of concepts than to any party affiliation. I do like, and someone was asked about that this morning. Okay, but are you okay? But how much of a big D Democrat are you? I said, well, unfortunately, the party is kind of caught up with where I was 30 years ago when I ran for Missouri Synod. So it's kind of easy to be a big D Democrat. But there was a time when I was a Green Democrat. I was the Ralph Nader Democrat. I was the, Bernie Sanders Democrat. That makes sense.
All right, fair enough. The league asked me to ask you, what are your qualifications to be a state representative? Second half of that question, because once you get started, I want you just to continue on. What do you think life would be like for a person like you in Jefferson City on the floor of the state house?
My qualification is as I left home when I was 17. So I've got 50 years of experience living away from the people who raised me, in addition to basic lessons they taught me. So I am a human being. And so as a veteran, as a father, and as a grandfather, as someone who's made, when I say people, I've been a musician, a philosopher, a farmhand, a truck driver. Those are the ways I made money, or paid bills. So I have those experiences. I also have the peculiar oddness of really not caring about sports or watching things like that. I tend to read. I do have a doctorate in philosophy, and it is in social and political philosophy. I'm also a proud law school dropout, and I believe that I'm a quick learner. I'm familiar with various lingua francas. I sometimes say I can detect BS in different professions. Okay, so what will it be like down there? I don't know. A friend of mine that I helped run away from home because he was abused by his father, and who later got elected to the Missouri legislature, was down there for a few years. He seemed to enjoy it. I've never really spent much time down there. I tried to get exactly two jobs working there as a lobbyist. I wanted to lobby for Planned Parenthood, didn't even get an interview, and I wanted to work for, I think the Association of Social Welfare, was run by a group, a guy named Peter DeSimone, who I don't even know if he's around anymore, and he just said, we got no money. So what I know about Jefferson City is what I get out of the newspaper and what people who've been there tell me.
You say also on your website, I had a great time reading your website, by the way, you have no talent for small talk or tolerance for dissemblers. Before you tell me about that, tell me I don't know what a dissembler is, and I hope I'm not one of them.
Oh, people look for falsehoods, who make pretenses, who dissemble. There's a semblance, which is an accuracy, and then the dissemblance is the inaccuracy.
You say you have no talent for that, but you do say you have a moral compass. We're going to run out of time in a couple of minutes, but I'm just curious as to help people understand your moral compass then.
Well, I say it's the 4 points are the 4 freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from fear, and freedom from want. And I keep hoping that people are going to recognize that as from FDR New Deal. And then I think I work in there the observation that with them, I negotiate, the points between justice and equality, the right to be left alone, and our duty to community. People got to be able to think about things like that if they're going to be in Jefferson City, I would think.
Final thought from you. You also have spoken about wanting to get away from wedge issues.
Yes.
And you want to reinforce again, small R Republican values and save representative democracy. This would be good for the question that the league also asked me to ask you, which I hadn't yet. And I think this is a good place to wrap this up. If elected, then how would you get away from wedge issues and what would you focus on instead?
It will be going to find those Republicans I've read about in the paper who were talking about concrete things. One of them is a guy named Joe, I'm not sure his first name, last name is Kidd, a representative from Buckner. He did not like Parsons' tax bill, and he said that it could have been better to help people who needed help. There are other people down there who have come up with good ideas, and the legislation gets hobbled by the crazies who want to hang all these other sectarian issues on the public good, right? So I want to go down there and find someone who wants to talk about using ARPA money to fix the roads. Everyone in Missouri agrees the roads are crap. So let's just spend the money to fix them. And then they'll have to stand with me to stop somebody from putting some kind of weird, no contractor shall be obligated to, respect LGBTQ, protections, or, they will have to be honest and find Democrats to work with. And this is why it's important that we kill their supermajority. If they don't have the supermajority, they'll have to work with Democrats. And suddenly you've got a world in which, oh my goodness, we got 50 Democrats and 45 reasonable Republicans who want to pass some kind of actual legislation that solves a problem rather than making freak news. That's my opinion.
Hey, Rachel, well, we appreciate your attendance here tonight. He is the Democratic candidate for the 44th district. He is running against the incumbent Sheree Tolson Reich. Dave Rethel, thank you.
Thank you. We're not taking a break here. Doug Mann, if you would come up, this is, again, we're broadcasting live on KFRU and KOPN. So we make a quick transition here and do the same thing with our next candidate, who is the Democratic candidate for the 50th district. Again, this is a district that has new boundaries. And I might ask as my first question of my guest who is up here right now, this is the 50th used to be represented by Sarah Walsh, but now it is a different district. How has it changed in the redrawing of the borders for this district? And welcome, by the way, Doug Mann.
Thank you very much. So the new district, it encompasses primarily just Columbia.
There we go.
Sorry, can everyone hear me now?
Right into it.
All right, so it encompasses primarily just Columbia. There are some parts of unincorporated Boone County that work their way into the district. But now, instead of being a primarily Republican district, it is about 54% Democrat, which means that it's winnable for us, but we still have to put it.
Why are you running for this seat?
So I moved to Columbia several years ago, and me and my wife, we fell in love with the area, decided to make it our home. But we found that there's lots of attacks against Missourians that we just can't stand idly by and watch. These include attacks on education, underfunding of schools, attacks on teachers, attacks on healthcare, whether it be reproductive healthcare or lack of access to physical or mental health care, and attacks on workers, such as right to work, attacks on unemployment, attacks on prevailing wage. These are things that I can't stand idly by and just watch happen. And I feel I have the skill set necessary to push back against them.
What would you call your main and best qualifications to be a state rep?
I would say my main qualifications are effectiveness and empathy. To be an effective legislator, you have to be able to build relationships. And through my professional career, whether it was as a teacher or now as an attorney, I've had to build relationships with a wide variety of stakeholders in order to achieve my end goals. So the ability to work with Republicans across the aisle on those things that we might necessarily agree on would be one thing that would qualify me, and also empathy. The ability to listen to people and understand their needs and actually deal with their feeling when they're.
What would be some of the things you would like to work on? Some of the issues that you would say, okay, if I could take these to Jefferson City, I would like to prioritize these.
So number one would be education funding. The funding formula was fully funded with transportation this last cycle, but that's just the bare minimum. We could be funding our schools more instead of cutting taxes, as Adrian alluded to during his forum performance. I guess I'll call it a performance. We could be funding our schools better, and that would allow us to attract more teachers. We want to be going down to 4-day weeks. Teachers want to have to be digging into their own pockets in order to find resources. Next would be healthcare access. We are one of the only states that does not allow nurse practitioners to practice to the extent of their training. And if we were to allow them to practice to the extent of their training, then we wouldn't have people not being able to get the primary care that they need. And that would prevent a lot of healthcare issues down the road.
You have on your website that you're endorsed by Run for Something. Tell me about Run for Something.
So Run for Something is a national organization that endorses and helps out candidates that are first-time candidates under the age, I think it's of 35. So I just made that cutoff at 33. And as a first-time candidate, they provided me with resources and mentors to help me through the process, which has been very helpful.
What have you liked about campaigning?
Talking to voters. Talking to voters is honestly the best part of campaigning. Being out there on the doors, listening to people's problems, and really one of the most, so you'll run into people that are very thankful that you're a Democrat and that you're a Democrat running in the 50th and that they'll actually be able to be represented by a Democrat. But that's not the most rewarding voter discussion that I have. The most rewarding voter discussion that I have are the people that right now call themselves conservatives, but refuse to use the term Republican because they're disgusted by the Republican Party. Those people need a home, and I enjoy having conversations with them where we can find those 10-20% of issues that we agree on, where we are able to find that common ground and they're able to find a home in my campaign.
You know, you bring up something that I've wanted to ask every candidate, but I've not been able to ask them tonight. And I'm going to ask you, you talk about labels of Republicans and Democrats, and we talk about that all the time, and there are very strong feelings of what that means. Why don't candidates put that clearly on their campaign signs? What have you, did Run for Something tell you not to do that? Or, you know, it's like candidates don't, as a general rule, there are exceptions, but I mean, we can walk around my block and I see the signs that are up for different candidates. And I'm not in your district, so I'm not telling you should put that on there for my sake, but what are your thoughts? You're a civil rights attorney and a smart man. Why don't candidates put, I'm a Republican candidate for this district or Democratic candidate?
Well, I mean, the honest answer is probably the fact that there's only so much space on the sign and people see my name first.
You're already a good politician. Make the sign a little bigger or something else a little smaller, I would say.
But I would say that really it's because I want, when people vote for me, I don't want them to vote for me because there's a D next to my name. I want people to vote for me because of the principles that I hold and the values that I have.
That is a terrific answer, and I'm glad to hear that answer. Give us, you mentioned that you just missed the cutoff of being under 35. Some of the highlights of your life, though, to get people to know who you are that have impacted you to be at this point, that you have taken time off from your law work to run for this office.
So I would say that the first and foremost thing that brought me to this point would be my mother. My mother was very involved in politics when I was growing up. And when I was about 10 or 11, she came out as a lesbian in a very rural part of New York. And that was not easy for her because it was a very, it is a very conservative area. And seeing her fight, seeing her tenacity through all the discrimination that she faced to continue to be politically active, to continue to fight for what she knew was right, really ingrained in me that regardless of how hard it might be, that it's important for me to stand up for what's right. The next thing would be being a teacher. I taught on the southwest side of Chicago, and I had a lot of students who just didn't have a lot of resources. They didn't have a lot of things at home that some people do have. And the school itself didn't have a lot of resources. One of the stories that I like to tell out on the doors is about how I didn't have a classroom of my own. We had little push carts. And on the push cart, there was a projector, and my projector was being held together by duct tape. And one day it just stopped working. And the school didn't have the money to buy me a new projector, so I had to put together a GoFundMe. And I know that Missouri teachers are going through that very same thing right now. And that's not right. Our young people are our future, and we need to be investing in our education like our future depends on it, because frankly, it does.
Let me ask you this before we're out of time, and that is that and I have to look at this to get this title right, the Teacher Recruitment and Retention Blue Ribbon Commission. Just within the last couple of days, they came out, I think, with something like 9 suggestions to be taken up in Jefferson City to pay teachers more, to do some other things, maybe some bonuses for those who teach in tougher situations. I don't know what your familiarity is with that commission and what it proposes, but what are your thoughts about making the teaching and education profession better in this state, raising it up from 50th in the pay?
Well, like I said before, that all comes down to fixing the funding formula and making sure that we are funding schools better. There's not much that I can do in Jeff City to raise property taxes or to raise property values, but what we can do is make sure that state funding for schools increases so that we are paying teachers well. Right now, teaching is a stressful profession. And if I can make more money teaching at working at Veterans United in a less stressful profession than I can teaching, a lot of people are going to take that. And frankly, that's going to cause us lots of problems because we're losing a lot of talent in the classrooms. So paying teachers better, paying teachers fairly, frankly, it's not just paying them better, it's paying them fairly, would be one of my main priorities in Jeff City.
Anything else you want to just give us in a few seconds?
I want to touch on the question about having a dialogue, I think was the word that you used, with constituents. I think that that is extremely important. And as a representative, I would have a complete open door policy to all constituents, whether they voted for me or not, because I know that this is going to be a close district and there's going to be a large percentage of the population that did not vote for me, but I'm still their representative and I will still be there to listen to what they say.
He's Doug Mann. He'll be the Democratic name on the ballot if you're in the 50th legislative district, and the Republican name will be James Musgrave. Thank you very much for being here. We will take a 2-minute break here, and then we're going to go to a conversation that they're eagerly awaiting to hear tonight about an amendment number 3. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Now we're going to move into the issues portion of our evening, and thank you, those of you who are here to hear a conversation about the issues, a presentation about several of the ballot issues, but one is going to be a conversation from the two sides of amendment number 3. So we're going to have local attorney Dan Viets to speak in favor of amendment number 3. That is the marijuana legislation initiative. The speaker who would say vote no on that amendment is local businessman John Borland. Change that. I didn't know who was here now. You have a,
Oh, okay.
your name is?
I'm Brownie.
Put your microphone in front of you and say that again if you would, please.
My name is Brownie Kumar.
All right, so we'll have him here for the conversation on the no side of amendment 3. Each speaker is going to have 7 minutes to present what they would like to present on this amendment. And then we have some questions that have already been written. And if you have some that you would like to also have addressed during this time, catch the attention of one of the League of Women Voters and they will bring that up. And again, if you are watching us on Zoom, you can use the chat to engage us that way also. Dan Viets is going to be up first, so welcome. It's good to see you. And here's amendment number 3 conversation.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks to the league for holding this event. Thanks to them for inviting me to be part of it. I've been a member of the Columbia Boone County League for at least a few decades. And I gather I'm supposed to change microphones here, or perhaps use 2 microphones. We'll see what works. And so I have worked on this issue for 50 years. That's a sobering thought for me, at least. I know I don't look like I could have done that, but 50 years this fall, I've been trying to get the Missouri General Assembly to legalize marijuana, or at least not impose horrible, harsh new penalties, which was what they considered doing on many, many occasions in the years past. They're not going to do it. I can tell you, I think with a high degree of confidence, the Missouri General Assembly is not going to legalize marijuana. If we want it to be legal, which the great majority of Americans do, we're going to have to do it ourselves. And Amendment 3 is our best, and I dare say only opportunity to accomplish that. I don't believe anyone else is going to donate the money that it takes to put a measure on the ballot here in Missouri. I think we're very fortunate that the medical marijuana industry has been willing to help fund this, because many provisions in Amendment 3 do not benefit the medical marijuana industry. Many of them are directly opposed to the interests of the industry. But the industry indeed has helped us to put this measure on the ballot. Normal, with whom I've been affiliated for 50 years, had a large role in writing it. And we're responsible for many of the very positive consumer-friendly provisions in Amendment 3. Each year, for many, many years, our state has arrested more than 20,000 people. According to the best data available, 2.6 times as many per capita are Black people as whites, even though Blacks and whites use marijuana at virtually the same rate, according to every piece of data we have on that. It will be therefore especially beneficial to Black folks that we stop arresting people for marijuana, and Amendment 3 will automatically expunge the convictions of the vast majority of people who have been arrested for marijuana charges. Automatically, again, I emphasize that those offenses are presently expungible under Missouri law, but it's a cumbersome, expensive, and complicated process. Amendment 3 will make it automatic. The taxes on Amendment 3 will pay for that process. We believe it is very important that this is a constitutional amendment, because if it were not, the General Assembly would repeal it post haste. They've demonstrated their proclivity to do that time after time. They have no respect for the will of the voters. They repealed the heart of the Clean Amendment, which was passed in 2018, same time we passed medical marijuana. They repealed an animal welfare law a few years ago. If it's not a constitutional amendment, it will be repealed. So it's important that it is. That is a virtue of Amendment 3. The fact is, we may very well lose the initiative process. The Republican Party is actively attacking the amendment process. They do not want the people to be able to engage in direct democracy, and they may succeed. If we do not pass Amendment 3, it's going to be a long, long time before marijuana is legal in Missouri. Now, we are getting attacked from the right. a little bit at least. There was a lawsuit which failed to keep us off the ballot from the right wing. But strangely, many of the criticisms we've heard are coming from the left. They say this isn't the perfect law. It's not liberal enough. Well, it is a law, frankly, which can pass. And it is not the perfect law. It is not the ultimate law. It is a law which will pass with Missouri voters and therefore does contain some compromises. In other words, it's not the tomato model, it's the regulated and taxed model of marijuana legalization. It is the model which every single one of the other 19 states which have legalized has adopted. It is a very good law compared to any of those other ones. The General Assembly, however, if one believes it's not the perfect law and it needs to be changed, the General Assembly can do that by proposing amendments to the voters. They do it all the time. It's not difficult, it's not expensive. There are 3 amendments to the Missouri Constitution, which are on this November 8th ballot only because the Missouri General Assembly put them there. They can do that again. If they think that if people have confidence in the General Assembly to legalize, then they surely should have confidence in the General Assembly to propose whatever amendments they think need to be made. I think it's a good law as it is, but it can certainly be amended. It does not take millions of dollars. It does not take hundreds of thousands of signatures. As long as we have an initiative process, the legislature can propose any amendment they wish. And if the people agree and vote for it, then Amendment 3 will be changed. The fact is that there are no caps on licenses in Amendment 3. There are none, despite the fact that that falsehood is widely repeated. It's even in the league guide that our opponents claim that there are caps on licenses, and that's just not the case. Almost used some words that wouldn't be approved by the FAA to describe that, but the fact is there are no caps, and it's indisputable. There are no limits on the number of licenses in Amendment 3, nor are there any in our existing medical marijuana law. DHSS has chosen for the moment to limit the number of licenses. When the number of potential consumers quadruples after the passage of Amendment 3, I think it's quite likely DHSS on its own may issue additional licenses. But they are mandated, they are required to issue at least 144 new small business licenses. And those licenses will go to people who meet certain criteria, such as not having a whole lot of property, not having a very high income, living in a neighborhood that's been especially harshly impacted by marijuana prohibition, or having been arrested or having an immediate family member who's been arrested. There are many equity provisions in here, in addition to stopping those arrests, in addition to expunging those records, which are the most important equity provisions in this measure. The fact is that many of our opponents are people who want to sell marijuana themselves, and I don't blame them for that. I wouldn't mind selling marijuana myself, but what's far more important than who gets to sell marijuana is stopping 20,000 plus arrests each year. I'm going to run through a few of these slides until I run out of time. Hope someone will tell me how much time I have. Don't wait around.
You're about done.
I'm out of time. Well, very well. Very well.
We do have time for questions.
All right. We welcome you. You can stand up here if you prefer, or you can sit there. All right, thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bharani Kumar. I'm the Executive Director and Treasurer of Crossing Paths PAC here in Missouri. We primarily focus on drug and criminal justice reform. We recently actually worked on the Cannabis Freedom Act that was in the Missouri legislature in 2022, but unfortunately didn't pass due to circumstances, which I'll get to a little bit later. I'm here not because I do not support legalization of cannabis. I'm here because I want, if it is to pass, I want it to be proper, and I want to make sure it actually helps out every single individual here in Missouri, rather than a few companies. And got a couple of points to bring up. So first off, kind of going through some of the stuff that Dan Beats brought up. So first off, he talks about the expungement. I want to make it very clear that it is not automatic. It is a case-by-case basis via judge. So for example, if a county has a judge that is against legalization of marijuana and thinks that, wants to promote the private prison system, he can just not sign off, and people will still continue to stay in prison. that's something that we don't see that's fair. Another issue that we see is possession limits. So for example, he brings up the idea of home growing. You know, if you grow your own plant, one plant can produce up to 2 ounces of weed. If you grow 2, that's 4 ounces. Under the laws that they are providing, 3 ounces is a misdemeanor and 6 ounces is a felony. So growing up to at least 3 plants will automatically make you a felon. Another thing also with expungement that they failed to provide is that although they do talk about non-violent crimes, a lot of felonies that are involved with cannabis also include other penalties that were charged with them. And they say that if there's any other like charges with that felony, that they will not count that, and they will still have to serve their sentence. I also want to bring up this idea of licensing. So he did bring up the fact that there are no caps, but at the same time, we've been having problems with supply in Missouri. Right now, the medical side is about. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. The medical side, it's about double the price of the black market. If we're really trying to stop people from using the black market, we need to make the legal market competitive, and currently it's not happening. This idea of micro license, I feel like is discriminatory. If basically they're saying if you're underprivileged, you're still not allowed to compete with the rest of the people. I believe that, we should allow everyone to have a chance at these licenses. There should not be, the people that have medical licenses should not automatically have them and then distribute smaller licenses to people where they can't even compete with those companies. I believe that Legal Missouri is trying to push a monopoly on you guys, trying to secretly hiding it as recreational weed. I believe that, if we were to pass this, we need to make sure that we allow opportunities, we can get people out of prison. We also allow people to, get into this business, because again, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. We shouldn't cap the capabilities of people. We shouldn't cap the amount of licenses we give out or who they're able to work with, which Legal Missouri would stop. I'm also open to questioning if you have a question. I'll one more thing actually as well. He did bring up this idea of bipartisanship, that Republicans would not, pass anything. I'd like to point out that the Cannabis Freedom Act was written and sponsored by a Republican. We also had sponsorships from the Black Caucus of Missouri, and it was through the money of Legal Missouri and their lobbyists that stopped us from passing that bill.
All right. I like this microphone better than the lapel anyway, Dan. So we'll take questions now from the audience. And again, if you would write them on the index cards and catch the attention of someone to bring them up to the front, we'll do so. And if anybody also wants to join us through the chat also. I apologize for doing this one more time, but slow and clear for the people who are listening on Zoom, your name and your affiliation.
Yeah, so my name is Ballot. I'm the executive director of Crossing Paths.
And what is across the path?
Crossing Paths.
Crossing Path.
Yeah, it's a couple of black committee. We just focus on drug reform and criminal justice.
This is one of the questions that we've had that was handed in already, and it is, and we'll start with Dan Beats. Do you have concerns about the ballot proposal in Missouri for any future progressive proposals, especially if Amendment 3 does not pass?
I have concerns, but I'm not quite sure what that questioner is.
They're saying if we're not progressive enough to pass a recreational marijuana use, what does that do for further progressive possibilities?
I don't think it'll have any impact, really. Amendment 3 does automatically expunge the vast majority of marijuana arrests and convictions. There's just no doubt about that. I mean, the wording is as clear as the English language can explain it. The polling indicates the voters of Missouri will pass Amendment 3. So I doubt we're going to have to deal with any apprehensions about impact on future initiatives.
Mr. Kumar, same question to you. Do you have any thoughts about this in particular, about what this means for any other proposals that might come up that some people might think are in any way related to Amendment 3?
Well, I feel like the biggest concern was just like having an amendment, because we bring up this idea that Missouri legislature right now, it's really hard to pass something. Adding an amendment to the Constitution, any change, it needs 2/3 majority to pass. Like, do you really think we can get 2/3 of the Missouri legislature to pass anything? And again, as Dan Beats brought up, cannabis is a really it's a subject and law that's never going to be perfect the first time around. It's going to need a lot of tweaks and adjustments. So we want to create a system where those tweaks and adjustments can happen like as fast as possible. And through the amendment process, it takes too long to get anything done.
We'll start with you on this one and then Mr. Mead second. Tell us about, again, I think this is more explanation about expulsion in the amendment and who this includes and how it works. Mr. Kumar first.
Also, from my understanding, they say that it's automatic for misdemeanors, but after the fact, they kind of take felonies into a different account. So they look at certain felonies and they kind of rank them in a different order, and they also have different clauses. So for example, you know, if there are multiple felonies that were included in that first charge, then, you know, you just have to still serve your sentence. Of course, you know, it's filing stuff to serve your sentence, but either way, they talk about it being automatic, but it's not entirely true. And the fact that a judge can still decide whether or not, you know, you're expunged is, I think, not a great way to say it's automatic.
Speak first about the term expulsion and expungement. Go ahead, Dan.
Yes,
Yeah.
expulsion means you're kicked out of school. Expungement means that your criminal conviction has been wiped off the public records. I think this gentleman may be conflating the release from prison provisions, which are also part of Amendment A, with the expungement. Now, he's correct that high-level possession over 3 pounds does require petitioning and going to court, as is the law currently. But for the vast majority of arrests are for small amounts, and certainly well less than 3 pounds. And those people will automatically, without lifting a finger, have those records expunged. There's just no doubt about that.
If companies are able to sell more like hundreds of pounds of cannabis, wouldn't you say that someone that sold 3 should be free and should not be charged for that?
I believe you should be able to grow all the marijuana you want and give it to anybody you want. But in terms of what is realistic to pass, the voters are not going to pass the type of marijuana law that you would favor.
We'll start with you, Dan Beats, on this one. A question from the audience. Why would I want to hire people who are high coming to work?
Well, you might just want your employees to have a good time, but in fact, Amendment 3 doesn't require anyone to do that. Amendment 3 does say that for medical patients, they cannot be denied a job or fired for their off-the-job medical marijuana use. That's what Amendment 3 says.
Well, to kind of touch up on that, you know, I don't think there's any company that says you're not allowed to drink alcohol or smoke cigarettes off of work. So why should a company say that you can't smoke legal weed outside of work, you know? Again, like, as the same way you should not be allowed to be drunk at work. Same way you should not be allowed to be high at work. But I don't think that your job has any jurisdiction on you outside of work. So I think that laws that pertain to like being allowed to smoke weed outside of work should not exist.
I'll do Mr. Kumar first, then Mr. Beats on this one, and I apologize if I don't understand this. Yell out if I don't get this right. It's talking about a monopoly system and says, is it a monopoly system on the shoulders of the federal government and FDIC or the banks? Mr. Kumar, you first on this, please.
Well, so the monopoly is more in the fact that who owns the licenses, you know, they're mostly out-of-state companies that own these licenses who have provided the most money to legal Missouri. So a lot of those profits that you're seeing aren't actually going back into the Missouri economy, they're going out of state. And another thing with that is that, you know, we talk about allowing more opportunities for people to get into the industry. You know, it's been 4 years and there's not been a single addition to the amount of licenses that have been given out. I definitely know that there has been an increase in the amount of medical cards given out, but we have not seen that same correlation with the amount of licenses. So in that regard, plus the fact that the micro licenses don't allow those companies to also work with the people that have recreational licenses, it really, you know, how is that the same thing? How is that fair?
Mr. Beats?
It may be shocking, but there have been people from Missouri making money in marijuana in Colorado for the last 11 years. We live in America. There's no industry, there's no business that is limited to Missouri residents. So somehow that, to some folks, apparently sounds ominous that out-of-state people even from Kansas, I suppose, might come to Missouri.
I feel like the biggest concern
marijuana industry, but it's a bogus argument.
when it's millions of dollars coming from California, Washington, DC, and not from the pockets of the Missouri citizens, as far as that's an issue.
We'll start with Mr. Beats on this one. Will Amendment 3 help reduce expenses associated with assistance programs in the state?
Assistance programs.
Welfare and other for
I
those.
don't think it'll have any impact, you know, and we don't have to just speculate anymore. We know from the last 11 years' experience in beginning in Colorado and Washington State, what does and does not happen when adult use is regulated, taxed, and legalized. And it hasn't had any impact, and I'm aware of, on welfare payments.
I don't know
presume you
whether you
agree.
want
Yeah.
to. We have another question, I think, to hand in there. I'll start with Mr. Kumar on this one, then come back to Mr. Beats on the concerns that we see sometimes in covering this particular amendment issue have to do with who's behind the writing of this amendment. I think you've addressed some of that, but again, speak to who are those who are backing this and what is your position in regard to the feeling that some are going to be locked out of the opportunities because the people who are writing this have so much power that they have concocted this in a way that they can control the market.
That's just not true. I beg your pardon. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, so I mean, I can talk to my experience on the Cannabis Freedom Act, you know, and the parties that worked with it. It was an omnibus bill with Democrats and Republicans, you know. We worked with Democrats throughout the whole process, you know, we had the Black Caucus's approval on it, and you know, we really tried to do our greatest effort to make sure that it was as bipartisan as possible, get the most people on it as possible. And then again, Legal Missouri stopped us. So I feel like, you know, he's trying to fabricate this idea that the Missouri legislature refuses to allow cannabis to be legal, but that's not true. They're listening to you. They want this to pass. It's just a matter of, you know, actually getting it done. This amendment's not the only option, you know. Reach out to your legislature, let them know they are listening. You know, and
We did not kill the bill that he's referring to. The Republicans killed that bill. The Republican majority in the committee that heard the bill, first thing they did was amend caps on the number of licenses onto it. And then they barely passed it out of committee. And then the House leadership chose not to bring it up for a floor vote. That happens to hundreds of bills every session. Legal Missouri didn't cause that to happen. In fact, Amendment 3 is a far better bill than the Missouri General Assembly will ever seriously consider passing. If you remember medical marijuana back in 2018, they were trying to pass a medical bill to keep us from passing a good medical bill on the ballot. The last version of the House medical bill would have limited medical marijuana to people who have been diagnosed as dying within 6 months and living in hospice care. They couldn't even pass that medical bill. They're not going to legalize marijuana.
I definitely recommend looking into Nick Schroeder and who has been paying Nick Schroeder's.
Final question from the audience. Homeless flock to Colorado to smoke weed. Will it happen here?
I question the premise. You know, once every state has legalized, then that sort of issue will disappear. We may be up to 24 legal states after November the 8th, and that trend is going to continue. So the interstate issues are going to disappear. The federal government eventually, I agree, will legalize, will repeal the federal prohibition, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. That's unfortunately going to be an issue we have to continue to contend with.
I have actually heard recently that Biden is looking into taking cannabis off the Schedule I, which I think would be a massive change. It will really change the scope of how we view cannabis for the foreseeable future. I do agree that like interstate travel is definitely a big issue that we're kind of seeing, especially because, you know, I feel like certain areas in the United States might be better at certain parts of like cultivating, distributing, and dispensing cannabis. So I feel like we can really kind of unite as a country, as a whole, when we kind of get past those state by state borders.
I said that was the last question, but I like this one. So this is the last question. And we'll start with you, Mr. Kumar. This law designates where profits will go. What are your thoughts about, and please describe where you see something good or bad in that?
Well, again, as I talked about with flexibility, I know if you kind of let the legislature kind of handle those not that I'm saying the legislature is right all the time, but like if we need funds to go somewhere, the legislature would be a lot faster at getting those funds to those places. Once it's in the Constitution, it's stuck. I honestly cannot tell, I don't want to lie to you, tell you where those funds of recreational is going to be going. But if, for example, there's a massive tornado that tears apart through most of central Missouri, if we don't have funds for that, we can't put out an amendment. We can't just put out a ballot to take those funds and put those for natural disasters like immediately, but the legislature can't. So I feel like that's something we can kind of consider about.
Once again, the premise is wrong. It does not, Amendment 3 does not direct where the profits would go, but I suspect the questioner means where the tax revenue will go. A 6% sales tax on adult use sales of marijuana will go to fund three things: addiction treatment, veteran services, and the public defender system. Once the expungement process has been completed, those three services will continue into the future, each year to be funded by what is estimated by our state auditor to be at least $41 million each year. That's where the tax revenue will go.
All right, we're gonna have to end it there. Those are the two representatives on amendment number 3. That is the amendment that has to do with recreational marijuana. An applause, please, for those two participants. And we'll give it a break here, and when we come back, we're going to have Barbara Hoppy up here, and she's going to, she's the president of the local League of Women Voters, and she's going to do a presentation on the other ballot issues. So please stay for that, listening on the radio and also here at the library.
Hello, everyone. We're in the section of our forum where we're going to look at the other three constitutional amendments, as well as the constitutional convention question. And these are very important. And so what I'm going to try to do is just highlight and focus on the essence of each one. And some are pretty straightforward, and others are not so much straightforward. And I'll try to highlight those two and go through this quickly so people can make good informed decisions on these questions. And I was going to mention that we have a lot on the ballot, and the constitutional amendment questions are on the back of the ballot. So we're going to look at constitutional amendments 1, 4, and 5, and the constitutional question that voters will vote on. Let's see. So the first is Constitutional Amendment 1. And this is the State Treasurer Investment Authority Amendment, or other people call it the Municipal Securities Amendment. And right now, this would allow Missouri legislatures to override the current constitutional restrictions on investments made by the state treasurer. And so it will allow the Missouri legislature to allow the state treasurer to invest in municipal securities. And some of the 5 highest long-term ratings or the highest short-term ratings. So basically, this gives the state treasurer more ability to make investments that are good for Missouri. And so the important thing I think people will want to know about this is that the amendment was put on the ballot by the Missouri legislature, and the House voted 156 to 1 in favor of it, and the Senate voted 32 to 1. So it's a pretty non-controversial bipartisan amendment. So I think, we'll go to what proponents say and opponents say. Proponents say the measure would give the state treasurer greater flexibility to invest funds held by the state of Missouri, which is something I mentioned. And the opponents say that it would give the legislature and too much control. So that's basically the first amendment that you'll vote on. The next amendment is Amendment 4. And we're calling that the Kansas City police spending. And this amendment is really not straightforward, and I would say a little, or even more than a little, deceptive. The language of the amendment does not mention the Kansas City Police Department or force, but it really only applies to the Kansas City Police Force because they are the only police force established by the State Board of Police Commissioners. And that's what's listed in this amendment. So the whole entire state is voting on this, but it only applies to the Kansas City Police Force. And I already have received a question from someone in the chat or someone in the audience. Why is the entire state voting on this? Because the legislature, well, I'll go back, I'll go to the background information. I think this will be helpful. So Kansas City is the largest city in the country, actually, that does not have.
Barbara, adventures on slide.
Oh, okay, thank you. Kansas City is the largest city in the country that does not have local elected control over their police force. And the only city in Missouri to have police force established by the State Board of Police Commissioners. The state of Missouri took control, and this is the history background of Kansas City Police Force way back almost 100 years ago, not quite, in 1939, due to organized crime way back then. And so currently, so that's where it started, and it's been around for this long. Currently, there is a 5-person board of police commissioners made up of Kansas City residents appointed by the governor and mayor of Kansas City that control the police force in Kansas City. And then a little bit more background. This amendment would allow the state legislature to require that Kansas City spend 24% of their budget for the police force. And the background is that Kansas City has spent over 20%, which is now the requirement, and even 24% of their budget. But this last year, they took 4% to direct it towards crime prevention and community policing related to policing. And the state legislature did not like that. And so they want to make it and so there was a lawsuit because right now the state legislature can only require Kansas City to spend 20% of their budget on the police. So this amendment is here so that the state legislate to overcome the legal objection. And so the state legislature can force Kansas City police to, or Kansas City police, Kansas City, the mayor, to spend 24% of their budget. So one of the objections, I'll go to that. Proponents say that the amendment is necessary to keep Kansas City Council from reducing police funding. It's really to increase, they want to increase it. The amendment ensures that the police force has necessary resources and the Kansas City Police Department should not be controlled by the city council. That's what the proponents say of this. Of course, in Columbia, the police department budget is controlled by the Columbia City Council. And that's how it is in most cities and all the other cities. Opponents say the city of Kansas City, the citizens of Kansas City should decide how their tax revenue is spent, not the Missouri legislature. Kansas City should have elected local control over its police force and how crime is fought through policing and crime prevention. They should have the discretion to use the funds as they see best to fight crime. The amendment, and also the amendment would have negative impacts on other essential city services, which will have reduced funding if they have to put their budget, more of their budget into policing. And that would be firefighters, roads, parks, whatever essential services there are. So that's an important one. It affects Kansas City. The league, I wanted to say, did a study last year on local control, and we adopted a resolution that is in general says that it's important for local government to have local control over as many things as possible because they're on the ground, they know what their needs are, and different localities have different needs. So I just thought I'd throw that out. We're not taking a position on that, but personally I have one. As you can see. Then we'll go
Do you
to,
know the legislative count on that one, the vote?
oh, no, I don't have that. But we can find out if,
I could find out, I just.
okay.
I've got a quick question on that. So for that to take place, local control, there would have to be a law change that goes back to 1939. Is that, do I understand you correctly? Because in 39, if that was established.
Yeah, right,
So
well,
a law would have to be passed.
Oh,
first
yeah.
pass.
the question was, does the law have to be changed so that Kansas City has local control? Yes,
You'd have to start with that.
well, that would have to be a constitutional amendment, actually.
Okay, so it was a
Yeah.
constitutional amendment at that time. Okay.
Yeah, right. So then we go to Amendment 5. And this one's pretty simple and pretty straightforward. It would remove the National Guard from the Department of Public Safety. And the Guard would have its own department that would be called the Missouri Department of the National Guard. And the governor would appoint the director with the consent of the Missouri Senate. And the director would report directly to the governor. The amendment was put on the ballot by the Missouri legislature with bipartisan support. The House vote was 126-2. The Senate vote was 32-0. So pretty non-controversial. And there was no opposition in testimony before the Missouri legislature on this amendment. So I think those are all important things to consider when you're voting. Proponents say the National Guard, whoops. Proponents say the National Guard will be more responsive if it reports to the governor. And opponents say this would break the chain of command that has been in place, and the governor would have too much power over the guard.
The way I understand it is that,
Oh,
Nobody can hear.
yeah.
okay. I'm just saying that the governor already has control of the National Guard. So
So that's,
adding another job
Yeah,
and creating
right,
another budget
right.
of 150,000 for a spot is.
So, someone in the audience said the governor already has control over the National Guard. Ultimately, yes, but this would change the sort of the command structure and how fast things get responded to. So it's the organizational structure. Ultimately, the governor has the control. And then the last ballot issue is the constitutional question. Shall there be a convention to revise and amend the Missouri Constitution? And this is, our Missouri Constitution requires a vote of the people every 20 years to consider this question. And so, and it can pass by a simple majority. So this amendment, or this question has been rejected by the voters every 20 years since 1942. So I just thought that was interesting to consider. And I wanted to go over the process. If this was passed, what would happen is the governor calls a special election to elect 83 delegates. The 5 parties in Missouri nominate one person in each of the 34 Missouri senatorial districts. The top 2 vote getters from each district then become delegates, making up 68 delegates. And then there's 15 at-large candidates that are elected on a nonpartisan ballot and represent the entire state. And the qualifications for delegates are they must be at least 30 years old, a Missouri voter for 3 years, and a resident of their senatorial district for 1 year. So if it was passed, that's how the process would go. And the there's only one requirement for the convention, and that is that the sessions of the convention shall be held with open doors. Pretty open, I would say. And then any changes recommended by the convention would ultimately need to be approved by voters. So proponents say that a convention is an opportunity to eliminate changes made to the Constitution in the past 20 years, which may be good or bad, depending what they are and what the people voted for and what you voted for. A convention would allow citizens to enact new reforms without approval of the governor or the legislature, but it would have to go to a vote of the people. But opponents say the convention could set off a potentially heated fight financed by special interests. The current political atmosphere is not right for a convention, and there are concerns about removing Medicaid provisions and other recent changes that the voters voted on and put into the Constitution. So that's pretty much the issues, the ballot issues. And I wanted to say that we have flyers out on the table that outline that in detail. And also, again, if you go to the League of Women Voters website, lwvcbc.org, we have a detailed voter guide that has these issues in detail with the pros and cons. And now I want to turn this over to David Lyle, who has done a fantastic job.
We'll wrap this up pretty quickly. I'm going to look at the ballot though and go back to amendment number 5, because on the ballot, it does tell you what the expected costs are for any of these things that are passed. And so on amendment 5, which the question, it says, state government entities estimate no savings if you passed amendment 5, which was the National Guard having its own department, ongoing costs of $132,000 annually. Local governmental entities estimate no costs or savings. So just to say, because that's what your question was, Adrian Plank, who had that question. Thank you all for being here. Those of you who have stuck out the last almost 2 hours, we appreciate that. Let me just make a couple of comments. League of Women Voters does thank all the candidates, all of the people here who brought the information about the ballot issues. Barbara Hoppy, who was our last presenter, the president of the local league. The forum is recorded. It will be posted on the league and the library websites. Lauren Williams here from the Columbia Public Library and her tech crew. We appreciate that. KFRU and KOPN. I know Tom Holmes back there has been giving us our cues and making sure we're on the radio. Thank you very much. There is the voter's guide for general elections. Also, you can go to the website, as Barbara said, League of Women Voters website, lwvcbc.org. Remember, no excuse absentee voting starts October 25th. It goes till November 7th. You have 2 weeks to do no excuse absentee voting. You must have an unexpired Missouri's driver's license or non-driver's license, an unexpired U.S. passport or other federal ID, picture ID, to vote during the no excuse absentee voting. And if you do not have an acceptable photo ID, you can still vote on election day. You'll be given a blue provisional ballot. We do encourage you to vote, and that vote comes up on November 8th. Thank you all for being here tonight, and have a good night.